Hey guys, earlier last week I decided to ask my social community if you would be interested in learning more about astrology. So for my first interview today, I decided to interview my father, Courtney Pridham, who happens to be a professional astrologer. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, my background is my father is a minister in a church. We were missionaries. We went out to the Philippines in 1979, and so I grew up there for about nine, almost 10 years, and then came back to the States. I went to Bible college. I graduated Bible college, ended up teaching some Bible college, then got involved in different churches and was in the ministry in different places. Then eventually we moved out here to be part of, in Jacksonville, Florida, to be part of a Christian community. And I was a part of that for about 4 years. And then about 15 years ago, I picked up a book on astrology and read something about your mother, who was an Aquarian. And it was kind of specific. So I was intrigued a little bit and started to, be curious about looking at it, where I'd always thought that astrology was very generic, very basic, that it wasn't something that was really specific to the individual. And so as I began to go down that hole of astrology, I learned that it was way more specific, that it was extremely detailed, that it had a lot of references even in the Bible to astrology. And so
your curiosity on mom is what inspired.
Oh, that was, yes. Trying to figure her out was not the easiest thing in the world. So, trying to understand, so many people, we all have this thing of where we oftentimes think people will be at least similar to us. They'll think similar,
right,
to the way we think. And that's not always the case. And you're trying to understand where a person's coming from. And so what I found with astrology is astrology gave a lot of the parameters to be able to understand where someone is coming from. So then what I would do is I would look stuff up on your mother and ask her, is this the way you think? Is that, yeah, that is the way. Oh, because it's not the way I thought. So
right.
The way I thought was very different. So you can use the same word, but it means completely different things to different people. And so that's why it's like, what do you mean by that word? And so that's where it really began.
So what about this idea where people get that they receive all of their thoughts and ideas and, just their individual thought from their environment?
Well, you're definitely influenced by your environment, but you already have a core way of being. So a person comes into this world and they have a core way of being. So for instance, how they're going to interpret beauty. Everyone is very unique in that way. They don't interpret beauty the same way. Everyone looks for beauty, but how they look for it and how they assess it is very different. And although your environment definitely has an impact as to the style in which you may do things, a lot of the basis are not so much in environment, because you can have, for example, with all your brothers and sisters, here are the 8 of you, all are born in different months, all define things differently, and yet you're all raised in the exact same environment. So, it does have a part in the style, but not so much in the drive, not so much in the what you're wanting.
Okay, so can you tell me some of the basics of a birth chart and what they kind of mean?
Okay, so, and I think we're going to be able to put something up on the screen there of probably a birth chart. But a birth chart, what it is it's the exact moment in time of your birth when you become a separate entity from your mother. Okay? So at that moment, that's a point in time. And at that point in time, it's like a camera's taken a shot of the universe, of our universe, what it looks like. And so a birth chart is that snapshot. It shows at what degree and what minute a planet is at. So if we take the whole imagery of the way our universe, or our solar system at least, looks like. We have the sun here, and then we have all the planets that are following it. Okay? So with the sun here, and then we have Mars, and we have Earth, and we have Venus, and we have Mercury, and we have the moon, and we have Jupiter, and we have Saturn, we have Neptune and Pluto. Okay, so we have all this out here. What they're doing is they're all rotating around with the sun going out like this. They're following like a tail, rotating. And so what we're doing is we make a 360 degree here, and we see where Pluto is at that moment. So Pluto may be here, where the Earth is here, and the moon is here at, let's say, 6 degrees, okay?
Okay.
And so then what we do is we take and we smudge this all in one line, like this. We bring it all together, and that's a birth chart.
Okay.
So it's showing where all the planets are, what degree they're in, and let's say you could have the sun in 24 degrees Pisces, where then you would have Venus in 1 degree Aries, okay? So it's showing where that is, and the relationship. A birth chart shows the relationship between the planets. Are they in a 90 degree angle? Are they in a 180 degree angle? And all of these angles have different meanings.
And so how are we measuring these angles? Is it based on where we exactly are in a geographic location? And is it, how is that?
So everything is in relation to Earth.
Okay.
Okay, so it depends on what city you're born in.
So it's Earth is in the center.
Earth is the center, yes. So Earth is right at the center of the chart, because at the center of the chart is you. You are the center.
Okay.
Everything is a description of how it's relating to you,
so
the
it's
center.
as if the planets are revolving around me.
Yes, a chart is that way. Although everything is set, you know, to where they are in the sky, but it's also in relation to you. So the biggest thing that's going to change for an individual is the moon, because the moon moves very quickly. So depending on where you are, that can change. Also, it's what we talk about, the houses. So a chart has 12 houses. And although if the sun is, like right now, the sun is at 1 degree Taurus, and it is and Uranus is at 6 degrees Taurus. Okay, that's the way it is. So it doesn't really matter where you are. It's at 1 degree Taurus.
Okay.
But in your chart, it's going to be the house that moves then, depending on where you live. All right? The houses will change. But the fact that it's in 1 degree Taurus, it's 1 degree Taurus all over the earth.
Okay. So why would someone want their chart read?
Okay, so the whole idea is astrology gives a person a language. And it gives a way of looking at things that you might not have seen it that way before. For example, an astrologer isn't one who's going just to predict the future or tell you stuff you don't know. That's really not the purpose of astrology. Astrology goes in and begins to describe things within your own being that you know you have, but you maybe didn't have words for it. Okay,
Right.
So it's like you can begin to describe the way you would feel about something or the way you're driven. So, for example, you being a Gemini, Gemini has a natural curiosity. That's the way Gemini operate. It wants to understand things, okay? So Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury.
Okay.
All right, so Mercury is about communication.
Right.
It's about how we understand things, how we communicate, how we put words to things. Because what we do is we take and we put a word to it. Now, the essence of that is not necessarily captured by the word. For example, a palm tree like we have over there. All right, we call it a palm tree.
Okay.
But it is what it is. We just put a label on it. And when we label it, we can then talk about it and begin to describe it. All right? So what it's doing is it's taking drives inside a person and wrapping meaning around it, like words that we can use to begin to describe and examine and look at it. So what a chart does is it begins to delve into who the person is. The idea is that the astrologer is not telling you stuff you don't know, but he's putting it in a way that you hadn't thought about it like that. Like, a lot of people are very ignorant as to their own giftings. They take it for granted because it comes so naturally to them. So they're not as familiar with. Yes, it's easy for you, but it doesn't mean it's easy for somebody else.
Right.
And so this idea that everybody's born with just a clean slate and they're all these blank individuals that come into the earth, that just is not the case. And anyone who has a baby can see that. They realize that the personality is there at birth.
Right.
Yeah, it's there. You know, so this idea of blank slate just doesn't exist. So what we begin to do is we look at some of the deeper things. Plus the fact that everything works off these rotations.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, you take a day, for example, 24 hours in a day, and we have 60 minutes to an hour, okay? And we have 60 seconds to a minute, all right? So everything is in these rotations.
Fractals.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So life begins to work in these rotations.
Okay.
Okay, for example, you are in your Saturn return, okay? So Saturn return is something that takes place because Saturn is a little over a 28-year period before it comes back to where it was when you're born, all right? So that's a rotation. And what it does is it ignites the energy of Saturn. And Saturn has the energy of confining and restricting and bordering, all right? It wants something to be set and defined, is what it wants.
Setting the boundaries.
Absolutely, okay? So the idea is that when a person gets to be around 28 years old, between the ages of 28 and 30, what we're doing is we're seeing that they have to set their own boundaries. It's not about society setting boundaries for the individual. It's not about your parents setting the boundaries, okay? Because the parents will set the boundaries through much of the person's life.
Right.
But now they've had time now they have to establish their own set of boundaries. What is going to define me? What will I do and what I won't do? Where am I going to go? Where am I not going to go? And so this becomes the force. And we see this as an example in the biblical story of where at 30 years old, Jesus goes out to the wilderness to meet Satan or Saturn. So in the Bible, Saturn or Satan are kind of in interplay there.
Okay.
And that Satan is definitely an archetype for for Saturn, about setting boundaries and restrictions to define yourself. And Jesus is asked, who are you? You know, if you are the Son of God. So the idea is he has to begin to define himself, is what he has to do. That's what Saturn does. Now, everybody between the ages of 28 and 30 will come into that position and will have to go through that time period.
Right.
But this is only one of the cycles that are there. There are many cycles we see. And so the idea is that not that you're going to tell the person what's going to happen, but it's sort of like if you see a storm coming for a weatherman and he's going to let everybody know, okay, the weather.
Prepare.
Absolutely. And you can understand this is what's kind of happening.
Okay.
You don't set what the person's going to do because they have to determine that themselves. But you can tell them the season they're going into and why they may be feeling what they're feeling. And this becomes the real strength or the point of sort of understanding the weather of your life.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I definitely feel, I felt that going through my Saturn return, and I do feel, you know, myself, all right, setting the boundaries, this is who I am and this is who I'm not. So yeah, it's definitely been an important thing. So for my viewers, just to kind of better understand what the birth chart is, let's go into a very specific person's birth chart, one that someone or all of you might know. Let's do Trump.
Okay. Well, look at Trump.
Let's look at Trump.
Yes. He's got as with most people, he has an interesting birth chart. All right. So you'll see there Trump, born June 14th, 1946.
Oh, Trump's a Gemini.
Yes.
I didn't know.
Oh, yes.
Gemini.
9:53 a.m. in Jamaica, New York.
Cool.
So, Trump is what we call a Gemini sun. He is a Leo ascendant. His moon is in Sagittarius. All right. So typically with astrologers, you'll hit the big three. All right, because these are very major. A sun sign is major, but probably even more important almost is the moon, which is Sagittarius, and then the ascendant, and the ascendant is based on the time of birth. Every 2 hours we'll go into a new sign, okay?
Okay.
So he had Leo as his ascendant at that point, all right? So what you're looking at there is as a Leo ascendant, this is on his face. This is a person who is about individual character. This is a person who wants to stand out, who wants to be in the spotlight. Okay? So that Leo ascendant is someone who, again, they want to be seen. They want their individuality, their own creativity to be seen and recognized. Okay? That's a very strong thing with Leo. You'll see a lot of actors and actresses who are Leos. Okay? Because they have a natural stage presence, they like to be there. Now that isn't all Leos, because there are some Leos who only like to be seen by a few people. But every Leo likes to have their unique self recognized. It's not just about, oh, the group did this. It's like, oh no, but if there's a Leo energy there, yes, the group might have done this, but what did I do? Okay? So that's the essence of Leo. So here you have a guy who will present very much as a Leo. And you can see that, even with this idea of his hair, his mane is important to him.
His orange texture.
Absolutely.
Face,
is that not lion? Okay, yeah,
oh,
it is.
True.
It is, yeah. So this is what he is, all right? He's a Leo. That's why you'll often see he has a very, like, his demeanor it's an unusual kind of thing there. Okay. So the next thing you look at is the sun, and his sun being in Gemini. What this is dealing with is this is someone who is they're very much in the moment, and they're trying to think. So they will talk, and when they talk, they're thinking.
Yeah.
All right.
I do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a Gemini ascendant, so I do too. So you think when you talk. So it means that you can shift very quickly.
Right.
All right. Because if you're talking and if you see a different way, you just move over there. Yeah. It's no big deal, because you are set on, I want to do this, and I think I can do it this way. But if you determine, no, I need to go do this, or I need to do that, then you just shift. Now, that's why a lot of times he'll get accused of lying or changing his position. In his mind, he's not.
Right.
All right. From his perspective, my objective is here. I'm going there.
Right.
How I get there is I'm going to shift and I'm going to move.
Right.
Okay. This is something that again, it's very quick. And he's also conjunct. All right. So his sun is conjunct the planet Uranus. Uranus is about spontaneity and unusualness.
Okay,
all right?
so that's where we get all the, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next?
He is made to be unusual.
Okay.
All right, this is a nonconformist.
Okay, very entertaining.
Yes, yes. But for people who need things fixed, it's very destabilizing.
Right.
All right, so he is a nonconformist in an absolute conforming position.
Okay.
All right, so the position of president is really about conforming. It's about a solid image. That's why he's so crazy and unusual, because he's not doing that.
Right.
He's not being that solid fixed thing, because he's not made, that's not who he is.
Yeah, he's being this is me, unique.
Absolutely.
I'm in the spotlight, this is how it's going to be no matter what.
Yes, that's how, okay. Then you take the third position here, which is that he has his moon in Sagittarius.
Okay.
All right, so the moon in Sagittarius, what this is doing is, this is his inner state. We live in our moons, because it's in our moons that we think about the past and we think about the future. So the idea is the moon is both the past and the future. The sun is the present. It's in the moment. In the moment, you'll be your sun energy. He'll be Gemini in the moment.
Okay.
But when he's reflecting, he'll reflect to the past. So when we go into our heads, we go to the past and the future. We don't live in the moment. We go to the past, future, and that's where the moon lives. So this is the energy that he's using. And the energy is Sagittarius. It's one of exploration. It's one of going into the foreign. It's one of expansive view. It's a larger view. Okay, so this is the polar to his Gemini.
So Trump and I have the same sun and the same moon.
Moon, yes. Yes, just a different, where you're a Virgo, he's a Leo. Okay. So what he's doing there is he likes to travel, he likes to go places. This is going to make him feel good, you know.
So that's why he's always doing these rallies with all these people.
Oh, well, that's his Gemini.
Yeah.
His Gemini lives in that. You will see that with his Gemini, he doesn't like to use the teleprompter because he feels controlled.
Okay.
This is a person who wants to be unique and in the moment, and he wants to speak from where it's coming. When Gemini gets going, it just goes. It's not scripted.
Right.
Okay? So he feels alive. He feels using his energy when he's just going. The problem is, in his position, he's made to be very much in conform control. That's what the president is. It's conform control. But he is not conform control. Okay, this is why a lot of people do react to him too, is because he is not really fulfilling that stationary role. All right? He's very active. Now, it's not that he isn't being himself. He is being himself. But it's not so much in that position. Now, the other thing is that he's a 10th house sun. So a 10th house sun is a sun that is made to be in a rulership position.
What is the 10th house?
Okay, so the 10th house, you have 12 houses in a chart.
Okay.
And the 10th house, each house has a somewhat of representation in the signs.
Okay.
Okay, so the 10th house would be the sign of Capricorn, is what it would be similar to. And Capricorn is the image of father. It is structure, it is set, it is stable. It is that which stands out in the public view. All right?
Okay.
So he is supposed to embody the public view. He is supposed to embody the public image. All right? And again, this is going to piss people off because he is unique. He is a nonconformist. And people want unique conformity. The problem is they want it in their leader, but they don't want to do it as themselves. Trump, in reality, is very American. He's a nonconformist. He's going to do what he wants to do. This is what America really represents. But we don't always like to see it in the leadership, because what we always picture of leadership is much more British.
Right.
It's much more English in nature, which is very much about conformity,
very proper, yeah.
following the rules. And Capricorn is about following the rules. Okay?
Okay.
But because Uranus is there, it wants to make these things different and change the established rule. Okay?
Okay.
So this is a conflict in him. Now, another thing he has is he has a 4th to a 10th house, what's called the nodes.
Okay.
Okay, there's moon nodes, and this is where you look at the idea of where a person is and where they're evolving to. All right? So for him, being a 4th house, he very much understands the nature of family. And family for him is very strong. Being a 4th house south node, family is strong.
Okay.
But he needs to come up into a position of leadership and rulership, and to be the established father, okay? To be the one that is set. So as far as his evolving goes, if you see him become a little more established, a little more towards traditional things, this is how he evolves.
Okay.
You know?
So he's moving from his crazy...
Well, he's moving from the sense of family, comfort, just being his own individual self, into a position of responsibility.
Okay.
Now, the other person who had these nodes was Bernie Sanders.
Ah,
Okay?
interesting.
So Bernie Sanders had the same nodes as Trump. Bernie Sanders is very similar to Trump, except he is more Virgo. Okay? So Bernie Sanders... So when we talk about family, we're not just talking about birth family. We're talking about what you deem as family. All right? And for me, as I looked at it, especially last election, Bernie determined that the Democratic Party was going to be his family. And so Bernie ended up giving up on his own position to stay back in family. He did not push to evolve.
Right.
Okay?
And then his family ultimately burned him.
But, yeah, twice. But that's what he chose.
Yeah.
And you can choose that. It's a difficult position. Everything, when we look at the nodes, it's difficult to push to where you're transforming to. It's easier to stay where it's at. So, because where we're transforming to, we have all the energy to do it, but it's unfamiliar to us, so there's a discomfort in it. And so when Bernie needed to take the stand, to stand out and say, no, this is the way it is,
Right.
he yielded. And he did it again. So he tends to yield, which is, he's not taking that step forward. He's yielding for the sake of family. And that's what he's familiar with.
Right.
But it's not, if I was counseling him, I would say, no, you have to stand out. You have to go.
Right.
You have to say, no, this needs to be for his own evolution.
for his own, like, basically like what his life is about.
Yes, he should have taken a stand out and did not, twice. So, I mean, again, these are where you begin to look at and understand where a person's coming from, and you can understand their struggles. Okay?
Right.
So for me, in looking at someone like Trump, you know, when people would say, oh, he's an ideologue, you know, he's pushing an ideology. Well, no, that's not. If you look at his chart, he's not pushing an ideology. Okay? There's just no way. That's not the way he's built.
Right.
You know, you'll see a person that's built to push an ideology.
So you would say Trump is fully being himself when he's on that stage, when he's presenting himself to the world?
Yes, he is definitely being himself. Now, do I think he needs to evolve more in that Capricorn thing? Absolutely. He needs to become a little more structured. He needs to take on that decorum that comes with Capricorn. But I will say this, it's extremely difficult for him to do it. And he'll never be totally conformist because he's got Uranus there.
Right.
Which makes it unusual. All right? So that's what I would say. Let alone his policies or anything. If you look at his chart, what you see is someone who wants approval. All right? That's probably one of the biggest things. He wants to be liked. He wants to be acknowledged for his accomplishments. You could get so much. I mean, if people want to manipulate him, he's very easy to manipulate. If you compliment him and if you praise him, you are going to be just showered with good things. Okay? I mean, he's not someone, I mean, he's got Mars. Okay, so another example is he's got Mars in the first house. This is a person who's a doer. They're driven. They just are. First house is the house of self and individuality. And he's got Mars in Leo there. This is a force. This guy is a force. All right? He's got Jupiter in the second house. This is the sign of wealth. The sign of expansion of possessions is Jupiter in the second house. You know, so these are the things that, you know, that you can look at and see where a person's at.
So if we switch it up and let's say we want to take a look at the Tiger King's chart.
Okay. Yes.
Let's look at the Tiger King's chart because every person in their chart, they have different planets more in different houses, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's look at his.
Let me see. So, in looking at Joe Exotic, and what we have for Joe Exotic is we have a March 5th, 1963 at 9:14 p.m. And it seems to be a correct chart in Garden City, Kansas. So here we have a Pisces, a Libra ascendant, and a Cancer moon. Okay. So Joe Exotic has a natural flair. So if I look at the Pisces in the 5th house, what I'm looking at is Pisces in the house of Leo.
House of Leo.
Okay.
What does that mean?
So Leo, remember, is that creative, that idea of Trump's ascendant is in Leo.
Me, look at me.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the one where I want my individual creativity to stand out.
Okay.
Okay, so Leo is the house of individual creativity, the 5th house. It's about creativity. It's the house of children. It's that which is creative.
Okay.
All right? So here he has his Pisces sun. Now his Pisces is the idea of very creative, borderless limitlessness. Okay? So it's ruled by Neptune. And Neptune is about our view to the unknown. So there's a big flair and creativity with Pisces.
Okay.
All right? So if you can imagine, this is someone who has a very artistic incline that wants to be very expressive and stand out in the spotlight. That's his just natural state.
Okay.
All right?
We see that.
Yes. So his moon is in Cancer.
Okay.
And in the 10th house. So again, the 10th house is a house of status, a house of prominence. He wants to be a leader of some kind, but he's very emotionally sensitive. Okay? So he will not do well with criticism whatsoever.
Okay.
All right? Because the Cancer is the image of the crab. The Cancer is the hard outer shell, soft inside. So it wants to appear like it's tough, but it's really good. Okay, it's very soft. All right? So, and here this 10th house, he wants to be seen as someone of status.
Right.
So that makes him feel good. What our moon does is that's how we're going to feel good. All right?
Okay.
So emotionally that will satisfy him. We also have his Libra ascendant. This gives a very diplomatic sort of presentation, you know, that you will with in dealing with people, how things look, how things present is going to be important. Okay, this is a person who wants to throw parties, who wants things to look a certain way.
Okay.
All right? The presentation becomes really important for the Libra ascendant. All right, so you take that, and then you take his well, let me see. So his moon, again, with the moon is ruled by or Cancer is ruled by the moon, so it's within its sign. He's got his Mars in 10th house Leo, which makes him aggressive. Okay, there's an aggressive nature to the way he does things.
Okay, so in his leadership and the way that he combated with Carol Baskin.
Yes, it's aggressive. Now his nodes are the same as Trump. It's a 4th to 10th house node.
Oh man.
Okay, so
Okay.
he has a place of family, but he wants to have a place of prominent leadership. That's what he
okay.
wants.
Interesting.
Okay, but he has Saturn in the 4th house. What that tells me is, and it's in Aquarius, his father was probably cold and very restrictive.
Okay, and Saturn is that limiting, restrictive
Yes. So when
energy.
it's in the 4th house, that means it's limiting the home. So that means there was a very probably you notice, I don't think in the documentary or whatever there was any mention of his dad.
I don't think he talked about his.
There was a
father.
limiting there's a limiting force there. Okay, so in the home would be like, ooh, that's not so good.
Right.
Like there's a thing with his dad. So, but he needs to move beyond that, move beyond that sense of limitation into a very nurturing, leadership role, where you could see even in the story, I think, where that's probably initially what he was trying to do, but
With
what
all
in
of the
with
tigers
with
and
well, not only that,
lions.
with the staff and everything.
Okay.
There might have early on, but somehow he, because of this sense of restriction, you see, what we do is we end up defining things often by the things that are around us. This is where it's an interplay between the energies and our environment.
Mm-hmm.
We're not absent from our environment at all, because that sense of limitation then is seen as a very negative force. Where other times we can have a sense of limitation which seems as a comforting force, okay? Because it's providing protection and shelter.
Okay.
So limitation is not always bad, but if you have a negative, if you experience that Saturn energy in a very negative way, then you can tend to define it that way, okay? So another thing I would see in his chart, let's see, that would stand out. So he has Pluto in the 11th house. What that tells me is that he likes to actually work with other people, have other people around, but he needs to have a certain confidence. He has Chiron in his 5th house right next to his sun. And this Chiron energy, what it does is it's called the wounded healer, because there is damage that's there, and it's conjunct his sun, which means it's conjunct himself. So I would guess that the image of himself has been hurt,
Okay.
you know, and I'm going to guess that's probably because of the Saturn, his father, in the 4th house. And so because he becomes uncomfortable with his expression, he's always looking to overcompensate for it.
Okay.
And I don't know if he has at this point found healing for that, but he's trying to learn how to really, if he can be more confident in himself, he'll be better with people.
So
All right?
is that why, like, the battle with him and Carol Baskin, that was just like really, really intense and crazy, and he needed to.
Well, she became that Saturn in his life. She became that sense of restriction.
Okay.
He's going to react to that really bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And then with the Chiron, what exactly is a Chiron, or what
okay,
is?
so Chiron. So not only do we have the planets, we have the asteroids and all these, which there's literally thousands of those.
Okay.
So, and they all play a part in, you know, how a chart would be read. You know, again, each person's going to study the asteroids in a different way and use them depending on the astrologer. But the Chiron is a big one that's used a lot, and it has the whole imagery, like I said, of the wounded healer. And so it goes all the way back to Hercules and the whole story there, because this is where we get our archetypes from, a lot of the Greek and Greek mythology.
Okay.
And so what ends up happening is Hercules goes and he's shooting this arrow. Chiron, who was his mentor, ends up getting in the way of the thing and takes this arrow into his leg. Okay, well, Chiron is a demigod. That means his father's a god, his mother's human. All right,
Okay.
and he cannot heal. So he's like constantly in a state of like dying and being reborn, dying and so he goes through that pain. Now Hercules didn't do this intentionally to him, but he ended up getting wounded by this.
Okay.
Well, the story goes that Chiron ends up giving his life in exchange for man to have the fire, the wisdom of Prometheus. Prometheus steals the fire, and a price has to be paid, and Chiron volunteers to be the one who pays the price, so that man can have wisdom. All right? That's why he's placed in the sky. So what it is it's the energy of a wound that when it heals, this becomes part of your mission in life. It becomes a strength to you and not a weakness. All right? But there is a wounding there that takes place. Now, Chiron's return is at 50 years old. And it's usually at that point, or just before that point, that people are really dealing with their Chiron, with that wounding issue, is around 50 years old. Okay? So, again, these are the cycles that go on. It depends on a person's age as to what to really look at and look for.
Okay.
You know, the other thing is to always look at their transits that are going on. So, although they have a fixed birth chart, we have transits that are constantly moving and activating aspects in their being.
So those are the shorter periods.
Yes. Yes. They're shorter in some, and some are long, like Pluto transits are a long time.
Because it's so far away.
Well, it's 247.7 years for Pluto to go around the sun. So in a lifetime, you're not going to experience all the points.
Right.
Where for Uranus, it's 84 years. So a person in a lifetime can experience all the points of Uranus.
I see.
And so Uranus is the planet of individuation. What makes us an individual and unique. And so it hits every sort of point in the chart so that, in a sense, by 84, you are the unique individual you are. Because it's challenged you to release yourself in all these points.
So it really takes your entire life to really truly know who you are.
Oh,
Or-
you won't even know. No. It's way
That's
more than
comforting.
that. Yeah. You can never, because there is the physical aspect of the person,
Okay.
and then there is in the sense, the spiritual aspect of the person.
Okay.
That which animates this body, and that part that leaves this body when this body is expired, that light that goes out. All right?
Okay.
That is an eternal part. Astrology doesn't talk about the eternal part.
Okay.
Astrology only talks about the physical part. All right? And in that way, all astrology does is it talks about how you're trying to manifest the spiritual part, the eternal part of you.
I see.
Okay? But the eternal part of you is perfect. It doesn't have any flaw. But when you're trying to express eternity in a temporal state, it's challenging. And
Right.
that's the human experience, is we're trying to express an eternal reality in a temporal body. Eternity is the idea, it's limitless, no time or space. And yet we are in a fixed time and space. Now, how do you express limitlessness in limits? How do you express eternity, everything, in a small form?
Very painfully.
Yes, and that's why that is the human challenge. It's never easy.
Right.
That's why people can feel I'm so much more than what I'm doing, and that is true.
Right.
Or they can say what they did, I didn't express it right. I didn't say it, I didn't do it right.
Right.
What is that's saying I didn't do it right? That's not the body.
That's like the inner voice.
That's absolutely the inside that knows that didn't come out right.
Right.
Okay? And so this is the challenge, and this is what astrology kind of looks at is, because we have to hone, we're trying to Virgo ourselves. Okay, so Virgo is always about
Effects.
Yes. It is about mastery. It's about getting better and better and better.
Yeah.
And so what you
Every
do
day.
is you take Cancer at the 4th house. So Cancer is the 4th house. It's home. It's unconditional acceptance. We move from unconditional acceptance into Leo. Okay? Leo being the 5th house.
Okay.
And in the 5th house, we learn our creativity. Once we have unconditional acceptance, we can easily learn our creativity. All right?
Okay.
Once we find our creativity, we move to Virgo. Virgo is where we master that creativity now. So once we learn what I am uniquely creative in, because I've had the chance to play and have successes and failures, it's okay because I'm unconditionally accepted. Okay? Then I move to Virgo. I want to master something. Once I master it, that's when I present it to the tribe. And I'm able to give my gift to the tribe. This is my mastery. All right?
Okay.
We move into Libra, and Libra is where we begin now the signs of partnership and community. The lower half of the chart is all the individual development. From Aries to Virgo is individual development.
Okay.
From Libra to Pisces is corporate development.
So it's about basically understanding what you can produce as an individual to add to the whole.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What your specific part is to add to the physical whole. This is not a comment on the interior of the person, because on the interior you are complete and you have everything.
And is that why people really, really want community and want to be a part of something? And
In a spiritual way, we are never divided and we're never separate from each other. Okay, so that is the core of our being. So that's why in community we touch that core. Okay? So alone, we have the community that is the individual.
Okay.
But outside of that, we have the community in the world. We have another. The only way we can actually even know ourselves is to have another. You can't know yourself by yourself.
Right.
All right? You have to have another in order to see and reflect, to be able to find and discover yourself. Okay, so that's kind of the way that works. And again, astrology gives a format. It gives a way of looking at it, but it's not just a general thing. It's very specific to the individual.
Okay.
You know.
So to kind of close this up, what are some practical things that people could do now to kind of look into astrology or to look into their own chart? Like, what would you recommend for that?
Okay, so there are free sites, like I think astro.com. You can actually work up your own birth chart.
Okay.
And then what you can do is you can begin, a person, if they're wanting to study, they can just begin to look some things up. Okay, so they can look up their sun and their moon or their ascendant, and they can begin to read about those things. All right.
Okay.
And then it's just a matter of seeing where they want to go, what they want to do. Others, I mean, will call an astrologer and get a chart. I mean, typically, you know, for an hour or an hour and a half reading or whatever, it's about $95. You know, I mean, that's what I charge. Other people charge different things. But, you know, you can get readings. And what that'll do is that will give you enough information to last for a couple of years. But if they don't want to do that, they can go to, like I said, astro.com, and they can look up individual parts. Okay? Now, a person, they are more than their parts. So, because as an astrologer, what you do is you begin to merge them together. Okay? As an individual, you're sort of learning the recipe of you. All right? So when you do the things online, you're typically getting something more of a recipe. All right? So don't take everything literally. Definitely not. What you read, if it resonates with you, fine. If it doesn't, just ignore it. Okay? That's definitely the way of astrology. It's not about telling you something that isn't you. All right? It's not about trying to direct you or tell you what to do. It's trying to show you and give you a different perspective with which to look at yourself and to see, oh yeah, that's true. Maybe I could do that. Or even to understand another person. So relationships, it's extremely powerful because you can see where a person's coming from, what they're looking for. And you can see why people, in charts, you can see why people are together, you know, and how strong it is together. Whether there's a lot of commitment or this is just a temporary thing. I mean, you can kind of see that in charts.
Right.
And, you know, what the attraction is, okay? Because that's what it is. You'll see. So, for example, with Joe Exotic, his Venus is in Aquarius, all right? And so the Aquarian is a male energy in the feminine sign of Venus, okay? So there's an attraction there to a certain masculine quality is what that is.
Okay.
You also said you look at his Mars. His Mars is in Leo, so he's, you know, that would be a very strong individual, someone who stands out. So oftentimes in women's charts, we look at the Mars as the masculine they're attracted to, and we look at Venus as the feminine they're attracted to. And what typically happens is we're attracted to that which is inside of us.
Okay.
So if the Venus is in Aquarius, like in Joe Exotic, he's going to be that's the feminine inside of him.
Okay.
He'll be attracted to what he sees when he sees it displayed outwardly.
I see.
Okay? So the idea of the opposite attracts, not so much. It's and it's not, you don't want to, in relationships, you don't want to look as much at the sun sign. It's not as big of a factor as the Mars and the Venus and the moon. These are larger factors than the sun.
Okay.
That's why when people talk about their sun signs as, am I compatible? That's really not, no, it doesn't really work that way. You're not going to get a lot off that.
Because the sun is only in the moment.
It's in the moment, yes.
Okay.
And it's powerful, but it's not about the relationship. You see, where we think is in the moon.
Right.
So you're going to want much more moon compatibility,
So
almost
the moon
in
is
sun.
more about our emotions, you would say.
It's our emotions, it's a lot of our thought. A lot of our thought deals in the moon because we're constantly vacillating there. When we're just sitting sort of pondering things, a lot of times that's moon energy. Okay? So you'll know someone more almost by their moon than their sun. That will be when you really get to how they even identify themselves. Will be far more of the moon than the sun, you know. And so these are all, again, the chart, you can go on and on and on, as you well know, on a chart, because it just gets to, it can get to such extreme detail.
Right. So there's so many levels to astrology. So many levels.
A tremendous amount of levels, and you can never exhaust it. Just like you can never exhaust your own being.
Right.
What it is ultimately, it's about studying the community that is you. That's what it's about. Because everyone has a unique community within themselves. The parts of yourself you don't like, when you see it expressed in another person, you won't like them. Okay, that's what it is, because we see it now outward, and I don't like that.
So that's where people get the mirroring idea.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, it's like but that's why you have to embrace the things of yourself. You have to understand where it's coming from and why it's there.
Okay.
All right? Because what some can view as a negative, anything can go as a negative or a positive. So for example, the Gemini, again, the Gemini is moving very fast. It's Mercury, and it's moving quick. Okay? So what happens is it can get bored easily. Okay? So it has to know that about the Gemini quality. So your Virgo ascendant wants to go into depth and wants to understand.
Yeah,
okay? Your Sagittarius aspect wants to see the bigger picture. That's not what your Gemini wants to do. Okay? So
conflicted.
yes. So it's a matter of understanding what part of you, and you don't want to let one aspect of your being overrule the other aspects.
Okay.
That's the idea of the submission to the Christ. So the Christ is the spirit within every person. It's the anointing within every person. It's the eternal life within every person. That's why the whole concept is that it is supposed to shepherd all the 12 signs.
Okay.
And that's the mixture with Christianity in it, because it does shepherd these things.
I see.
So that's why we always go, and that's why when they have the practice of the breathing, the trying to center your being, what you're doing is you're bringing yourself to the center of the chart, which is the eternal state, which is non-astrological. This has not influenced by astrology.
So it's as if you have all these voices, and one's louder than the other one, and you kind of tune out all of those voices and come to the center.
To the center, which is the still small voice. It's not that the other voices are bad, because in the Bible they're called the gods.
Okay.
And it says that you shall have no other God before me. So the idea is that the center of your being, your eternal state, your actual being, this has to be the one that rules. and it rules through the other gods. It rules through the other energies. These are what express themselves. Okay?
Okay.
So if we listen to that central voice, then we allow it to manifest and express through the unique Mars that we have, or through the Venus, or through the Sun, or through the Moon, or the Ascendant. Okay? These
Right.
become the disciples then of the center of the Christ. Otherwise, what happens is we allow certain dominant aspects of our being to rule.
Okay.
And this will throw us off. This is what makes us very unhappy, because this aspect is ruling and it's choking out other aspects of our being.
Okay.
And that becomes a problem. That's when it seems like, oh, this is what I've always wanted, this part, but I'm not happy. It's not fulfilling my moon.
Right.
Okay?
So you're only playing, or you're only, what am I trying to say here? You're only focusing on one part of you,
Yes.
and not all the other parts.
Yes. Which means you can't have joy unless everything is going to find a part. Every aspect of your being has to play a part in your life,
Okay.
or there won't be joy.
But it takes knowing that those things are a part of you.
Yes, it takes working on it. It takes listening,
Okay.
you know. And so one of the things that we do is we try to identify those voices. All right. If you begin to read about your moon, you're going to begin to understand that voice inside of you.
Okay.
If you begin to read about your Saturn, you're going to understand that voice inside of you. If you begin to read about these things, you'll understand that voice inside of you more. It's when you identify it, you understand it.
Okay.
It's always been there.
Right.
You just didn't distinguish it from the other. You thought it was all one voice. It's not. And
Yeah,
so when you
makes
begin
sense.
to distinguish those voices, you can know that this is a dominant voice in my being, and I can't let it be too dominant. Okay? So that's how that goes.
Okay. Well, I think we've given a lot of information to digest. But yeah, thank you for giving us a little, lesson on astrology. And
Of course.
I hope that, anyone that decides to watch this, that they enjoyed it. And if you have any further questions, I guess just make a comment, and maybe we can answer that for you.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay.